Great. So thanks everyone for being here. We're honored to have you all here tonight for this special program. My name is Melanie Borker. I'm the Tri-State Regional Assistant Director of Alums for Campus Fairness. Tonight, we have the privilege of hearing from Shai Davidai, an Israeli professor at Columbia Business School. Since October 7th, Shai has tirelessly devoted his time and energy to battling support for terrorism and the rise in anti-Semitism at Columbia University and at colleges across the country. He continues to bravely call out the Columbia administration for failing to enforce its own policies and protect its Jewish and Israeli students and community members. We are so grateful to Shai for coming to speak with us today and for all of the work he does to support Jewish and pro-Israel students and community members. At ACF, we share Professor Davidai's commitment to defending Israel and humanity and supporting Israeli, Jewish, and Zionist individuals on campus from pro-terror student organizations. Our mission is to promote dialogue and foster a culture of inclusion and respect on college campuses across the country. Universities must remain pillars of truth with academic freedom, where all students can thrive. We believe that pro-Israel students have the right to express their opinions and beliefs without fear of harassment, bullying, or discrimination. Jews should feel comfortable being a Jewish person on campus. Sadly, over the last decade, but especially after October 7th, we've seen a rise in anti-Semitic and anti-Israel incidents on college campuses, including hate speech, vandalism, and even physical assaults. Mezuzahs have been torn down, swastikas graffitied. Jews have had to hide in locked libraries to avoid angry mobs of students calling for their death. Rape and murder of Israeli civilians has been justified as resistance. Yet somehow, many university administrations seem unwilling or unable to identify, call out, and address the very clear anti-Semitism problem taking over their campuses. ACF is dedicated to combating this trend. ACF is the only organization engaging in educating alumni to counter anti-Semitism and the demonization of Israel on college campuses. We have a unified voice of 53,000 and growing. We put leaders on notice of anti-Semitic incidents and organize rapid responses. ACF has deployed billboards, created petitions, and was featured in multiple news outlets to expose anti-Semitism and the double standards at schools across the nation following the October 7th Hamas terrorist massacre. We believe that by harnessing the unique power of alumni, we can help build a better future for all students, regardless of their background or beliefs. We invite you to join us in this work, and we thank you for your support. Before we begin tonight's program, I'd like to take a moment to introduce Michael Mantell, our ACF-Hunter College chapter leader, who's been instrumental in organizing tonight's event. Michael is a psychotherapist, educator, and the grandson of Holocaust survivors. In addition to leading our Hunter College chapter, Michael teaches modern Jewish history, facilitates a mitzvah project class, and serves as a board member of 3GNY, an organization that preserves the legacies and lessons of the Holocaust through educational programming. Michael's a strong advocate for our cause, working with New York City College students and alumni to combat anti-Semitism and cultivate Jewish pride on campus. I want to thank Michael for helping us organize this amazing event. I know we'll find Professor Davidai's remarks both informative and inspiring. So now I'd like to invite Michael to lead tonight's discussion.
So I'm going to read a little. Like I said, my memory's not that good. Do I have to hold it, or how we? Should be fine. If anyone can't hear me on Zoom, you'll let us know. All right. So before I introduce Shai Davidai, I want to thank Melanie and everyone at Alums for Campus Fairness, including everyone who helped set up, behind the scenes, tech and security. So we started the Alums for Campus Fairness Hunter College chapter a handful of months ago. It was just something, another iteration of combating anti-Semitism at CUNY Hunter College, my alma mater. And I've been joined by a handful of people who've been really wonderful, and some of them are here in this room. So I want to say thank you to the chapter leaders who are here with me. Some are also online, so thank you. Can I share your name? Jessica is here, Elise is downstairs, and we have a few other people who are on the Zoom, so thank you guys. Yeah. So this is our inaugurational event. So this is the first event that we're having as a Hunter College.
No pressure.
No pressure at all. No pressure at all. I mean, you've had a lot of pressure, so this is going to be nothing. So this will be hopefully gain momentum for all the things that we're hoping to do or looking to do, educational, social, and activism related. So this three-prong approach to combat anti-Semitism at CUNY Hunter College, the CUNY system, and in universities in New York City and hopefully around the country. So in addition to thanking ACF, I always have to thank my parents because they're amazing human beings. And I want to thank everyone for being here in person on Zoom and those watching this recording. And a very special thank you to Shai Davidai for agreeing to take the time to be with us tonight. So thank you. So I hope your family and friends and everyone's family and friends in Israel and in the diaspora are as healthy, safe, and well as possible. So welcome to this evening's program. Shai Davidai is an Israeli professor at Columbia Business School. He moved to the United States in 2010 to pursue a PhD in social psychology from Cornell University and has worked at Princeton University and the New School for Social Research. Ever since October 7th, Shai has been devoting his time and energy to battle support for terrorism and the rise of anti-Semitism at Columbia University and on college campuses around the country. I was wondering if we were going to do something more, asking some questions of Shai. Shai is very open to just starting and having this be an open forum for everyone here. And I'm a go with the flow kind of guy a lot of the time, and this being one of them. So I'm very open to do that. But before, I just wanted to say, when I told my parents about this event and that you, Shai, were gracious enough with your time to join us tonight, my father, who's not on social media, he told me enthusiastically, I posted his video on Facebook. So I want to say that even to those who still use an AOL email, you're a household name. So thanks for taking the time and for making my parents proud and for being here with all of us. So yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I say a few things before we start?
By all means, please.
All right.
Of course.
First of all, who we should really be grateful for her time is my wife, because she's the one that no one thinks about it, but like when I'm running around shouting, organizing rallies, talking with people, like my wife takes the burden of the household, the kids, which we used to be maybe not 50-50 but 60-40. And if there's one thing that I regret in the past few months is that I just feasibly cannot be more at home. So I always start with like saying a few things. And one thing that I always say is, whatever I say here, you can take a video, you can quote me, please quote me, accurately, but you can quote me, you can share it. I don't hide behind masks, keffiyehs, and sunglasses. I believe when you speak the truth, you don't need to hide. So please feel free to do that. The other things you mentioned in the introduction, tirelessly. Hell no, I'm so tired. I am exhausted. It's been a year and it's only been 6 months. So, and then the last thing I said, because you mentioned, and something that I've been thinking about a lot, you mentioned, you used the term pro-terror student organizations. And when everything started, I felt like I was seeing something at Columbia and then in other schools that I just didn't have a word for. And you can't fight against something if you don't know what it is. and especially as a professor, as an academic, like it's so important for me to have clarity in what is the world, what's happening. And I knew I didn't want to say the name of the student organizations when I made that very initial video, because I didn't want to give them free advertisement. And my wife and I kept talking about this. I was like, Yarden, how do we call them? And then it kind of like came to me, these are student organizations that support terrorism. So that's when I started using the term pro-terror student organizations. And I think something amazing happens when we use the right terms. And I assume this happens a lot in psychotherapy. The moment you use the right term, things become clear. All of a sudden, isolated incidents are clearly not isolated and it's a pattern. And all of a sudden, a quote unquote innocuous chant becomes clear, the intention becomes clear behind it, and the consequences become clear. So that's why I use so you know what? I'm just grateful for someone else is using that term, and thank you. And yeah, as I said, no question is off the table. Easy questions, difficult questions, like ask me anything. If I don't have an answer, I'll say I don't have an answer. Or sometimes people ask me something, I say, look, I have this intellectual humility. I won't speak about something I don't know. But please speak whatever. Yeah, ask me whatever.
Yeah, so we're happy to open it up to everyone, and also on Zoom. I think we had 200 and something people registered, so we might have a bunch of people having questions. I also have a few that some people asked while they registered. So yes, please. Sure, if you want to, I will go ahead and also bring the Q&A over.
Hi, thank you so much for being here. I'm Arabella Pollock. I'm a professor at Hunter.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's been a hard time. One of the things I'm interested in, though, is I'm not tenured. So how can I do my part on campus when my job is at risk?
Yeah, great question. So just to be clear for people who may not understand. So universities are probably the only place in the world where once you have tenure, you can do whatever you want, spew whatever hatred you want, and can't be touched. That's why we have people at Columbia like Joseph Massad, who on October 8th wrote that the massacre was awesome. And he wrote it on electronicintifada.com, and there's a picture of the Hamas armed brigades at the top. That's why we have people like Professor Catherine Franke at the law school, who said that every Israeli student who served in the IDF is a danger, and they cannot be touched because they are tenured. And the idea of tenure, the original idea of tenure, was creating a system that will allow professors to advance knowledge and become, and push the frontier of society. So without being worried about, minutia, academic minutia. What they're doing, but we're using it instead. These people they're abusing tenure to advance their indoctrination and brainwashing students. And by the way, and I can talk about this later, they are the real danger, not the student mobs, because the student mobs are going to graduate and get a mortgage and then realize that the world is not Marxist-Leninist, right? But in August, Joseph Massad and Catherine Franke and Rashid Khalidi and Hamid Dabishi and all these other indoctrinators are going to get a new crop of students. We're going to get a new crop of first-year students, and this starts again. So they are the real problem. So that's the idea of tenure. But like you, Arabella, I'm not tenured. And which means that I'm probably in a few years unemployed. So hopefully Hunter gets me. But you're right. I mean, it's what you're describing is like what can I do when my livelihood is on the line, my career reputation is on the line, my career advancement is on the line. And yes, and there's a power asymmetry where some people can say what they want, but you and I need to think twice and three times about it. I guess I'm not smart enough to not speak up, so that's why I spoke up. But there's things you can do. there's things you can do, and that's what I've been pushing everyone to. And I've been saying this: whatever you do, do. The only thing you shouldn't do is not act, right? Which means if you don't have to put your face out there like I have, you don't have to, stand up in a rally, but flood the university administrators with letters and handwritten letters, so they actually, care. Write op-eds. What are you a professor of, by the way? Business. Ah, like me. Really? So I'm Columbia's dispensable professor, business professor. But noting, writing op-eds, using your credentials to write op-eds to the New York Post, New York Times not going to care, but but other news organizations, organizing things for students. One of the things that I find so incredible is whenever I don't go a lot to main campus, luckily my office is off of main campus, but when I do, most of the times when I go there, at least one Jewish student, and in the recent weeks, non-Jewish students actually come up to me and thank me. And I'm like, what are you thanking me for? You're the ones in the front line. I have an office, I go away home. But just having someone that they know they can come to and speak with and cry to is incredible for them. So this past Shabbat, I did something that I not necessarily proud of, but I skipped my family Shabbat dinner to go to the Chabad dinner and just have dinner with students, Jewish students from and non-Jewish students that come from Colombia. And then a student said, "Hey, by the way, I'm going to another Shabbat dinner at Hillel after this." So I said, "Of course, I'll show up." So I came there and I saw like 300 Jewish students celebrating Jewish life, albeit in the basement, but we're celebrating Jewish life. And for them, just having someone come and say, "Hey, I'm faculty and I'm here to listen," or hug consensually, but or tell you how I feel, like that's so much for them. That's so incredible for them. Other things you can do is, if you want to speak up and you're concerned, and you should be, because we're not playing on a level playing field. Like the people on the other side are vicious. They are vicious, and I can tell you about that as well. But if you do it in a group, 5, 6, 10 people, an organization of Jewish professors at CUNY, you don't even put your name, and write a letter to if CUNY has a newspaper, a student newspaper. Some professors at Columbia did that. They were writing to the Columbia Spectator, and and speaking up like that. So there's many different things that we can all do, but the one thing we cannot afford to do is nothing, because I have children. I think many of you have children, and if not, maybe you'll have children in the future. And we know that whatever happens, if this ends tomorrow or if this goes on for 5 years, whatever happens, this is going in the history books. And your kids will learn about this. And there will come a day that your kids will ask you, like, or grandkids, like, what did you do? What did you do? Right? Just like I asked my grandmother, who fled the communist regime in Romania, what was it like? What did you do? And I asked my paternal grandmother, who endured the siege on Jerusalem, how was it like? What did you do? And my grandfather, who was in the Paliyam, you want an answer. You don't want to tell them nothing, right? So whatever it is, whatever you do, just do something. There's no shame in doing small things, minor things, because you never know what's going to happen, right? One of my mantras in life has always been, whoever wants to meet you, you say yes, because you never know. In the past 6 months, it's become very complicated because a lot of people want to meet me, not me personally, but the message, right? But we have this saying in Judaism, like this idea, and I'm not a religious Jew, but I'm very strongly Jewish. We have this saying that whoever saves even one soul saves the entire world. You never know which soul you will affect. You never know which student will then go and become a senator and change the entire world. So that's all of our responsibility. Yeah.
Thank you for the question.
And I hope that you know by now, you ask a 20-second question, you get a 20-minute answer. So, but I'm here for all night if you want. So, yeah.
Thank you. So in the introduction, we talked about how colleges are supposed to be pillars of truth and places for academic freedom. And unfortunately, that is the tug right now, because in the pursuit of quote unquote academic freedom, Israel is an apartheid state. Israel commits genocide. Israel is a settler nation, right? And these are not truths. This is the cancer that has been infected well before October 7th. It has metastasized on October 7th, right? So is it appealing to Congress to cut funding? Like, it's like teaching kids the sky is green when it is not. These are basic things that are just clearly not true. And it is the rot that is causing, I think, the anti-Semitism that we're seeing. And I don't really know what like you said, they're protected by tenure. Well, how do we upend it? Because that is the rot, right? And I don't know how to fix it.
No, you're absolutely right. So, it's weird because for the past 6 months, I've been leading 3 fights, right? I've been leading a fight as a Jew, right? Because I live here as a Jewish person. I'm raising Jewish kids. My wife is Jewish. I'm also been leading a fight as an Israeli, right? I consider myself a diaspora within a diaspora, right? But I'm also leading a fight as a professor. A lot of the things that are happening offend me, not just as a Jew or Israeli, but as a professor. For me, as someone who's not religious, academic institutions are the most sacred, other than maybe the Supreme Court, the most sacred institutions in the land, because they're supposed to advance the truth, find out the truth through research, and keep the truth going through education. And I don't know exactly what can be done, but I do know that the only way to fight lies is with truth. Because if we try to fight lies from one narrative with lies from another narrative, it's just a race to the bottom, and we actually end up legitimizing their lies. So the only way to fight lies is with the truth, right? Like if you have one wacko saying the sky is green, but then 5 sane, decent individuals know the sky is blue, then a student will develop critical thinking and say, you know what, maybe I shouldn't believe everyone. But what these people have done is push out through decades, push out the sane and decent individuals, right? So if you go, for example, on the Middle Eastern Institute at Columbia, they have a website with all of the people there. The one narrative that is not represented is Israel, is a Zionist narrative. Now, I'm not saying it should be the only narrative on campuses, but it should be there, right? Last I checked, Israel is in the Middle East. And what ends up happening, because academia, and I assume there's some professors here, academia, maybe an unknown secret is we hire our own. We say we love diversity, but they use a very, very thin definition of diversity, of an important, by the way, definition of diversity, including race, gender, sexual orientation, sexual identity. Those are important aspects of diversity, and that's a hill I'm willing to die on. But they forgot that diversity of thought is what academia is all about, right? I'm not saying it's one or the other. We can have both. And when you go on campus, and if you all think about how you developed critical thinking, how were you taught critical thinking? Well, it wasn't one class where a professor told you, here's how you do critical thinking, right? It was at least 2 professors in 2 different classes who said opposing things. You said in one class, in maybe econ, and they said something about the free market ideology, and that was very compelling. And then you said at a different class, and a professor told you about the problems of free market ideology. You're like, that's also compelling. And then you sat in your dorm room or you had a drink with a friend and you talked about it. And you realize these are true These are two truths. And you need to figure out what do you believe in? And you take the things that are compelling from each one. You cannot do that if you only hear one side of the story. And right now, if you enroll at Columbia University in the program for Middle Eastern Studies, you'll hear one side and you'll be indoctrinated in this one side. They're not academics, they're indoctrinators. And in fact, they will tell you, don't listen to the other side. They'll tell you when the other side says this, walk away, they're lying. So they don't want a discussion. I want a discussion. I want I want a student to talk. I don't teach Zionism, I teach negotiations, right? But I want a student that takes a class on Zionism and says, okay, this is interesting. I want them to also take a class that opposes Zionism and then sit down and think about it. But right now, we don't even have that. And I think that's the big problem. So in terms of what we can do, there's, again, I don't want to go too long, but in these past 6 months, I've developed this three-pronged program for what we can do. And whatever of these three things that I'll mention, and I'm not saying it's an exhaustive list, maybe there's other things out there and I'm happy to listen to them and maybe incorporate them, but take one of these things and push on that front. You cannot push on all three fronts. One thing, the first pillar, universities have to adopt a definition of what is anti-Semitism. Right now, Columbia University, Hunter, Stanford, Berkeley, all these universities, they don't have a definition of anti-Semitism. Now, you know why? Because once they have a definition, they'll have to deal with it, right? Doctors that don't diagnose a problem, then you don't have cancer because we didn't put you in the MRI machine. But they refuse to adopt a definition of anti-Semitism. You know who has a definition of anti-Semitism? The US government. So what is good enough for the president of the United States of America is not good enough for the president of Colombia. Probably she thinks she's smarter than the president of the United States. It was adopted by Trump, by the way, but either way, it's been adopted. The IRA definition of anti-Semitism has been adopted by the United States, by Canada, by most Western countries, by thousands of institutions, not educational institutions, but companies around the United States, not by academic institutions. That's the first thing. We need to push them. And by the way, we need to push for the definition of anti-Semitism to be adopted from kindergarten. This is not just, I get the students when they're already radicalized. And, it doesn't start when you're 18. It starts in high school. Now we're seeing this starting maybe in middle school, festering in middle school. So we need every school, every educational institution in the United States to adopt a definition of anti-Semitism. That means that if you are on a school board, bring that up again and again and again. That means that if you have ties with politicians, say like, you know what? You shouldn't fund institutions that refuse to accept America's definition of anti-Semitism. They should go, fundraise in Qatar, which brings me to the second point. And the second point is, we don't know who's funding American universities. We don't know because they don't have to tell us. We have a thing in the United States called campaign finance reform. Because when you vote for someone, and it doesn't matter if it's state level or federal level or even mayoral level, when you vote for someone, you want to know on whose payroll they are. You want to know who's paying for them. And because we believe that transparency is important. Well, we need an education finance reform. We need to know exactly for each of these universities, how much money are they getting from foreign interference? Qatar, Russia, China. By the way, also from Israel. I'm not pushing one side narrative. If Israel is giving them money, I want to know about this. So we want to know how much money they're getting from Qatar. What institutions in Qatar? Because these governments, you have to remember, these dictatorial governments, they don't give in directly. They set up funds, they set up hedge funds, and then they give. We need to know. And we also need to know what is this money earmarked for? right? For specific programs, for specific buildings, for specific institutes, we need to know this. So yesterday, I was at Cornell speaking at a rally, and I met a member of Congress. Actually, he gave me his card. I'll give him some free advertisement, but also hold him accountable. Marcus Molinaro, he's a member of Congress. He represents Syracuse in the area of Syracuse. And I told him, you need to pass legislation that every institution, he's in New York State, so every institution in New York that gets even 1 cent from federal funding or state funding needs to be 100% transparent of what other governments are paying you. I'm not even saying stop the funding. That's the next step. But we need to know about the funding, right? So that's something that, again, we should push for. And that's something that I don't know exactly how we should push for, but this should be, we're in an election year. This should be a talking point. This should be in every debate, Congress, Senate, presidential, every debate. They should talk about, the money that's coming to universities and how do we pass an educational finance reform. And by the way, that should be a bipartisan issue that's like, with sweeping support other than Rashida Tlaib, right? Other than people that are on, maybe are on Hamas's payroll. I don't know. I don't want to say a lie, but maybe, who knows? Other than her, everyone will agree. So that's the second pillar. So we need to define anti-Semitism and force all these institutions to accept the definition, the American definition of anti-Semitism. We need transparency in finance. But the third thing is, we can't just play whack-a-mole and fight against. We fight differently. We fight out of love. So we need to encourage and maybe even force these institutions to increase Jewish education. Now, what I mean by Jewish education is not religious Jewish education, but the following. Raise your hand if you know when Black History Month is. What is it? February. Raise your hand if you know when Gay Pride Month is. What is it? Raise your hand if you know when Jewish Heritage Month is. I wish people in the Zoom saw how many. Okay. Right. The United States has a Jewish Heritage Month in May, 2 weeks from now. How many of you, when you went to public school or high school or college, celebrated Jewish Heritage Month? How many of you, when you went to Starbucks, just like they see Black History Month, which is an important month, and I think it's an extremely important month when, my son is not African-American, but he gets to learn about that. Or when, I don't know what my son's sexual preference is, but his parents are heterosexual, and yet he learns about gay pride. How many of you go to any company, Coca-Cola, and it's like for Jewish Heritage Month, we're highlighting nothing. So we need to push from kindergarten all the way to PhDs, an acknowledgement and celebration of Jewish Heritage Month. And I'm not saying celebrate Israel. I'll deal with that. Celebrate American Jewry, right? I'll give just a few examples. Harvey Milk. Everyone know who Harvey Milk was? The first openly gay elected official in the United States of America. Happens to be a Jew. Emma Lazarus. Anyone know Emma Lazarus? Right? Right? She wrote the New Colossus on the Statue of Liberty. A Jew and a Zionist. There's a great biography of her that I'm reading right now. Right? Jonah Salk. A Jew, went to a New York City public school. Roger and Hammerstein wrote the song White Christmas. Jews. Right? But, people don't know this, which is so easy to vilify us and dehumanize us because they are not educated this. I'm not saying go and educate people about Israel, which I think we should, but that's a different thing. I'm saying celebrate American Jews. I am not an American. I hope one day to become an American. But my wife's American, my kids are American, my father-in-law and mother-in-law are American. there's a rich history. At some point, the Lower East Side was the most concentrated place for Jews of Jews in the world. The fact that we don't celebrate that is a shanda, right? It's shame. So if you are, again, if you're part of a school board, or if you have kids, maybe get on the school board, get them to celebrate Jewish Heritage Month. Now, there are websites where you can go and actually, like, they don't need to do the work. You can give them the materials. If you're if you work in HR in your company, just like you put posters for Black History Month and for Gay Pride and other important months, start putting posters for Jewish Heritage Month, right? Put our best face forward. Now, of course, Jewish history, like any other history, is not perfect. We're not a perfect people. No people are perfect. But we need to put, our face out there so people know. So that's long. 3 pillars. Let me just remind you. Anti-Semitism definition, funding transparency, and Jewish Heritage Month. Yeah.
So we'll keep on going. I know you have your hand. And then
I told you we should do questions and answers because I answer, yeah.
take on all of these.
Hi, Shai. My daughter goes to Cornell, so I was watching the live stream yesterday.
There was a live stream?
Oh, yeah.
I was not aware of that.
Or
Okay.
it was through Instagram.
Okay.
So thank you for speaking to and supporting the Jewish students there. What are you learning as you're going across and speaking on college campuses? What are the ahas for you?
Wow. You know what? That's a great question. I love that because I haven't been asked the question yet, so I need to think about it. So last week, on Wednesday, I went to SUNY Purchase, and it was a very interesting thing because I was 2 months ago, I was on a plane to a conference, Stand With Us conference, and a person next to me in the plane was the Hillel president of SUNY Purchase. And we got talking. She said, "Why don't you come?" And I said, "Of course. If you send me an Uber, I'll come." And I went to SUNY Purchase, and I'm used to speaking in rooms, when there's like Columbia has like a few thousand Jewish students and then many, many more Jewish professors, Israeli professors. Cornell has like thousands, right? SUNY Purchase has a few hundreds, and the ones that are outspoken are a few dozens. And I sat in the room, maybe 12 people there. And I realized something that I did not realize because I had the privilege living, in New York City, which is very high concentration of Jewish people. I didn't realize for them, they're an outpost. For them, just being an openly Jewish is an act of bravery. It's an act of defiance, right? I started wearing my Magen David since October 7th, and I wear it proudly, but also fearfully. But, pretty sure that wherever I go in New York City, there'll be someone else. They don't have that privilege. So I've learned that just the act of being Jewish in public is something that many, many students around the country are experiencing and having a big issue with, right? So I'm not even talking about the mezuzahs being torn down or students being verbally and physically assaulted, which is happening all around the country. And it's happening, and by the way, I've talked with high schoolers. It's happening in high schools. I'm talking about just the act of being Jewish, like wearing your yarmulke, and if you're a believer, wearing your dog tag or Magen David or Chai or whatever it is. To me, that's the most important lesson that I've learned, how privileged I am. The other thing is how much these students are yearning for adults to speak up. Now, of course, these students are adults, and I treat anyone above the age of 18 as adult, even if they're Jewish, or if they are a pro-Hamas, pro-Islamic Jihad organizer. Everyone's an adult, but they look up to us, and they're yearning for more, right? Like that's why they come up to me, and thank me. And I say, don't thank me. I'm just speaking up. I'm speaking my mind. But, and they don't care about Shai Davidai, and they shouldn't care about Shai Davidai. I'm nothing. I'm just a person. I'm a shofar. I'm just an empty vessel. But they are thankful for someone in a position of power or authority or just an adult speaking up. And that's why I've been pushing not just students to speak up and take action, but calling out other professors. And not Jewish professors, not just Jewish professors, Israeli professors, non-Jewish professors. When you signed up to be an educator, you took on a responsibility. Just like I took on a responsibility to speak up for all students, not just Jewish students. Every student deserves safety and respect. Non-Jewish professors, right now, most of them are bailing on the responsibility. So I wish those weren't my lessons. I wish my lessons, and I guess the other thing is that community is incredible. These students are forming incredible communities that I hope will last a lifetime.
I guess, is this on? Yeah. Since I have the microphone, I guess I can ask a question also. So.
Go for it.
So you're kind of like what you were asking with your background in social psychology and behavioral scientist. Was there anything that you said, I knew this was happening, or from your experiences before, were you kind of knew something was happening or surprised by other things from that background?
I did not know. I did not see this coming. Most of us did not see this coming. There were a few canaries in the coal mine that saw this coming. Deborah Lipstadt wrote a book. Barry Weiss wrote a book. David Baddiel wrote a book about this. Great books. And I'm ashamed to say, I read Deborah Lipstadt's book 3 years ago or 2 years ago. And I was like, this is great, this is great, this is great. Then I get to the chapter on campuses, this is BS. And I blame myself. And I think many of us should be blaming ourselves because we didn't heed the call. Because honestly, many of us did not want to see. We did not want to see when Dave Chappelle went on an anti-Semitic rant on SNL and no one said a word. If they said a word, it was, what a genius. We didn't want to, we didn't want to heed the call when Kanye West went, ballistic and hating on the Jews, and people are like, oh, he's just bipolar. Bipolar is a big issue and should be treated, but that's not an excuse for being anti-Semitic. We didn't heed the call when they chanted in Charlottesville, Jews will not replace us. Or, they said, oh, it's just MAGA. Or when the Tree of Life shooting happens, oh, it's just one crazy lone wolf. These were not isolated incidents, but we wanted to believe that they are. So we didn't want to see, so we didn't see it. But what I'm working on is to make sure that now that we've seen it, we will never unsee it. And if that's my life project, that will be it. Making sure that no one forgets. At the same time, since everything erupted, a lot of my training, my education in social psychology helps me understand what is happening. So for example, we've known since the 1970s that people are more vicious and uninhibited when they wear a mask. There's a lot of research from the 1970s, social psychological research. Right. You're viciously opposed to COVID. And yeah, there's all the things that are happening online. But what are we seeing right now in these protests on campuses and today in New York City? And I can talk about that because that's what I was dealing with before coming here. Masked protesters calling for the death of Jews, of Israel, and of the United States of America. Well, why are they allowed to protest with masks on? Because during COVID, there were laws on the books in New York State, in California State, many other states, saying you cannot protest with a mask on. But during COVID, because that's restriction on our free speech, those laws were repealed. We need those laws back because this is what happens when people have free speech, but also no consequences. I'm all for free speech. I'm not for impunity. Free speech doesn't mean freedom from consequences, freedom from accountability. So that's something we learn from social psychology. The other thing that we know from social psychology is people listen to individuals with authority, regardless of if that authority is valid, if it's actually, it should be respected, right? When someone is on TV and it says, and they wear a white coat and they look like a doctor, and then it says not a doctor, but we listen to them because they look like a doctor. Well, when someone like Joseph Mossad tells his students that Zionists should not exist and we should, that they're the root of all of the world's evil, then they listen to him because he's a PhD. It doesn't matter that he's got his PhD at Columbia and then started teaching at Columbia. By the way, you know which academics tend to teach in the institutions where they got their PhD? Those that didn't get any job anywhere else. Like, I would, you don't get to teach where you got a PhD unless you go somewhere else first. Only if you're an indoctrinator. So there's all these things that we know about how individuals work, how groups work, how mobs work. There's all this knowledge out there. And they are misusing this knowledge to create what we're seeing now, this violent rhetoric and, unfortunately, actual violence.
Can I also ask you another question?
You ask them, I don't
Yeah.
know.
Is that all right?
They're gonna
I
be
know-
lynched by the mob, not me.
Just really quickly, because you're talking about the work that you do, on your website, there was a page about the research against contemporary and traditional anti-Semitism. So is that okay if I ask you just?
Let me circumvent that.
Yeah, sure.
Because it's one of the things that I'm actually embarrassed of. Sometime around December, early January, I felt so overwhelmed with all the hate that I was seeing. And I wanted to make something constructive. And I said, I'm an academic, and there's almost no research out there about the oldest prejudice in the world, anti-Semitism. As an academic, that troubles me. Like, we need more knowledge. So I thought of, let's start this network of researchers, and I call it REACT, researchers, what is it? Researchers Against Contemporary and Traditional Anti-Semitism. And I got a group of people, but then I just can't find the time. I just can't find the time. And at some point I had to tell one of the people, can you take this on? I'm so sorry that I'm dropping this on you. So I don't know where it stands, because, between fighting anti-Semitism and actual terrorism on campus and, going around and speaking with students and parents and grandparents and being a parent myself and, and taking care of my kids and family, that's one thing that I need to get to it. And I'm embarrassed that I haven't yet, but yeah.
I think they say you can start something, you don't have to finish it, so that's okay.
No, that's not in my family.
Right. Well, the only reason why I ask is because I went to Hunter College, clinical social work, and one of the problems is not just the professors and what they say in the classroom, but the choices of the reading materials that they choose. And that's why I ask you, because there's very little on a discussion of anti-Semitism within social sciences,
Right.
et cetera. So
if you're in the social sciences, or someone in the social sciences, psychology, sociology, economics, political science, urge them to study anti-Semitism so we can teach the students. Right now, like, there's some work on anti-Semitism in history, in literature, but not in the social sciences. So that's a problem.
Thank you. Yeah, so it's all right. I'm gonna work my way back, if that's all right. We'll do that.
Hi. I went to Duke University for undergrad, and about 2 years ago, they started a Jewish alumni affinity group. So I'm trying to get involved in leadership there. Do you have any advice for what groups like that can be doing now?
Yeah. So after October 7th, Columbia alumni, they organized a Columbia Jewish Alumni Association. They wrote an op-ed for Columbia Spectator, the first of its kind, written just by alumni about what's happening. They circulate petitions, they email the administration. But personally, for me, they have just been a blessing. You know, they have been so immensely supportive. And when they see something vicious happening online, they reach out to me and send me their love and their prayers and asking, like, you don't realize how much that is meaningful. And, I don't know who are the vocal professors on Duke's campus or vocal students, because we have more vocal students than vocal professors at Columbia, helping them, reaching out to them and saying, what can we do for you? How can we mobilize for you? That's very big. Another thing, one of the alumni from Columbia started the two things. He started Flip Your Diploma campaign, which you saw, amazing. Asaf Shelley created this, just like to show the university, like, we're still here. We love Columbia, but we're fighting the administration. And the other thing he started was the $1 pledge. Now I think they should start a $0 pledge, but if one or two of us does something, the university can brush us away. But if 1,000 or 2,000 of us write the exact same message to Columbia or to Duke on the giving day, it's not giving day, it's taking day. They take our money, they don't give anything back. So telling them, I think that can make an impact. Another thing is, I don't want to name him. Maybe he wants to be named, but I won't make the decision for him. One of the organizers for the Columbia Jewish Association, Alumni Association, has been very active with his network to get the Wall Street Journal to write about what was happening at Columbia, and it was a huge article that helped us cancel the reappointment of an anti-Semitic professor. Right? I couldn't do this. A, I don't have the time, and B, I don't have the network. Right? Alumni, you probably know people in the media, in the local media, and in Raleigh, in North Carolina. You're more likely to know politicians. You're more likely to know the trustees, the big donors. Right? 6 months I've been talking about this. Not even a single trustee reached out to me from Columbia. You'd think that they would reach out even to say, hey, stop. Nothing. Maybe they have lawyers telling them not to. I don't know. Maybe they think I'm some sort of monster. None of them. I mean, the president hasn't reached out to me. She never replies to my emails, but whatever. You have that connection. Now, I would love for someone who gave $150 million to Columbia and their name is on the building to be like, hey, what's, beautiful name on the building. You know what's in the building? Hamas propaganda. Just let's get coffee for 30 minutes. I'll let you know, and then you make your decision. You want to support Hamas? That's on you. That's your money. I'm not going to tell you what to do with your money. But the fact that they won't even speak with me, but they will speak with alumni.
So two things. This is a great time to mention again, we're here with Alums for Campus Fairness. I'm a layperson who said I want to get involved because of some of the work that I was doing. I experienced anti-Semitism at Hunter College over 20 years ago when I was undergrad, and then again in my grad program. Why did I go back? It was inexpensive otherwise, and probably not many better options. But I experienced that, and I knew it was happening, and I got involved. There were some now alumni who were then current students in 2021. I connected with them, and we wrote and initiated a Title VI complaint against the university, which is now in an open investigation at Hunter College. So as an alum, that's something that I was able to do. But to just bring this back to Alums for Campus Fairness, an incredible organization. I don't work for them, so I guess I can do this shameless plug. I just said, hey, I want to know more about you and what can I do? So I just met with a few people and we started a chapter, CUNY-Hunter College, had some people show up, and we're having this incredible event. And hopefully, again, this will lead to more things happening to connect alumni with students, because as you said, we are now hopefully secure in our jobs. We have different positions throughout the country and different fields that we can offer that assistance to. I always thought students, but also professors. It's an excellent point, and faculty. So yeah, I think that's an.
And I'll add one thing, because again, my point is, it doesn't only have to be a whack-a-mole reaction to what's happening. It can also be proactive Jewish excellence, right? So one thing that I'm hoping for, and I've talked with some of the Jewish alumni, to, you know, during what do they call it? The weekend, reunion weekend, have a Jewish event for the Jewish alumni, right? Get to know each other and invite the students that are currently there to be with the Jewish alumni. Create that feeling, that network. And by the way, so maybe I should, so I don't forget to say this later. On Wednesday morning, the president of Colombia is finally going to testify in front of Congress. And well, and honestly, to be completely honest, I don't care what she says. It's not personal for me. I don't care if she loses her job or not. I care that she does her job. If she wants, if she can stay and do her job, great. If she can't, clear the space. Someone else would love your 7-figure salary to actually do your job. So on Wednesday afternoon, 5:30, we're organizing a rally outside of Columbia. Well, I said we. It's End Jew Hatred is organizing the rally. And I'm hoping to get as many people out there, not just students or professors, just any Jew that's concerned in the tri-state area. And one of the biggest helpers is the Columbia Alumni Network, because they were so involved. And I was like, I hope as many of them will come and show up and treat it as a reunion. Come meet your friends, come meet other new Jewish people that you didn't know, and show the world in a peacefully, non-violent manner how we rally rather than they protest. Bring Israeli flags and American flags, because the only time they bring an American flag is when they burn it. We're going to show that we're going to show our love for the United States, our love for Israel, but our hate for terrorism. So if any of you can come, bring a friend, and you know, and move, you know, keep that going, I think that would be great. Yeah.
So let me see. We had some hands raised, but now they're down. I'll come here.
By the way, I promise I'll answer every question. Even if the time's up, I'll stay and I'll answer all your questions. So,
It's an honor to meet you, Professor Shai. Okay, I'm fine. I'm a graduate of both of the New York City hotbeds, New York University for my bachelor's and Teachers College for the master's. You didn't know what anti-Semitism was when I went to school. So far, I have written an email to the Board of Trustees of New York University complete with citations from articles and links to various articles. I did not put their feet to the fire. I threw them in head first. I have looked at what I could find about what NYU receives from Qatar, Saudi Arabia. The only numbers that I'm coming up with, and we can't verify them because they give contracts, there's all kinds of underhanded stuff. It's about 120 million. That's what I have found. I cannot cite this as a fair source. Columbia also gives contracts and all of this stuff, so you don't have a number. You cannot get a number. But I am also right now working as a substitute teacher in the New York City school system. Don't envy me this job. We are up against something called diversity, equity, and inclusion. We are also up against critical race theory. This has been going on for what people tell me is 20 years. I speak individually to teachers of every race, every background, And they all say DEI is a disaster, but we can't get, how do we dismantle it? And it must be dismantled. You also talk about how wild and crazy these kids are. Well, in school right now, there is something called restorative justice, where all you do is sit down with some administrator who's probably overpaid and talk about your problems, and you get, there is no direct punishment for anything. So the kids are getting away with murder. Okay, so the question is, how do you approach DEI and CRT and this social justice resolution of problems? How do we do this?
Okay, so I'm glad you asked because I'm glad you asked. And by the way, I want to say, my view is different than yours, I think. And it's okay. We can disagree on certain things. And that's an important part of this. And right, so the idea of DEI in its pure sense is a great idea. I really do think. Because when you ask people, what do you think of DEI? They're like, I hate DEI. What do you think about diversity, equity, and inclusion? Oh, there's nothing wrong with diversity. There's nothing wrong with equity. There's nothing wrong with inclusion. DEI has become the name of the programs that are faulty. So I try to understand what happened from the idea in its pure sense that's actually incredible to its, what we're seeing now. Because if I'm very, very worried that we will throw away the baby with the bathwater. Because I look around here and I see a lot of Jews, and they are not being treated fairly by DEI. But I also see a lot of women. And if we do away with DEI, your lives will be worse, not better. And there's a lot of Jewish LGBTQ individuals. And if we do away with DEI, their lives will be very difficult. And there are a lot of Jewish Black Americans. And if we do away with DEI, their lives will be horrible. So I'm thinking, how do we improve DEI? And it might, just like when you you renovate your house, you think, oh, it's just the kitchen, and then you start, and it's like, oh no, the foundations are horrible. Maybe the foundations are problematic and we need to completely rehaul it, but we need to have that. Because what we're seeing now, the idea of DEI is that diversity is important, equity is important, and inclusion is important. Right now, they're failing on the inclusion, right? And they're failing specifically the group that doesn't have a diversity problem. We are not underrepresented, doesn't have an equity problem. We are not underpaid, but we're excluded. And that's what they're failing us. So the idea at its pure sense is great. But what happened was that some, I'll call them radicals, with the radical ideology have taken over DEI. And their ideology is this ideology of oppression Olympics, that all different groups in society can be ordered by, this idea of oppressor and oppressed. And if you are oppressed, then you obviously can't do anything wrong because you're not an oppressor. And if you're an oppressor, then you cannot be a victim, right? That's why they think Hamas can never do anything wrong because they're oppressed. And 9-month-old Kfir Bibas, he's not an innocent baby that was kidnapped into Gaza because he's an oppressor. It's a demented mentality. But what they did is they created the suppression Olympics. They put some groups at the very bottom. They put the white heterosexual Christian male at the very top. Right? And by the way, in society, in American society, white people are privileged in many ways. Men, as a male, I can say, we are privileged in many ways. That doesn't mean that we can't be suffering in other ways, right? Lower class white heterosexual Christians are still lower class and they suffer from an unequal system. And then they saw the Jews and they didn't know where to put the Jews. Do we put the Jews at the bottom? Because for 2,500 years we've been persecuted? Nah, it doesn't feel like it. Let's just throw them up at the top. That's why 2 days ago when I was up in Ithaca, New York, I got in an argument with a used bookstore owner, and he said, no, you're not Jewish, you're white. I said, that's, tell that to the Nazis. You know, like you don't get to erase my identity, but that's what they did. They erased our identity. So I don't think we should do away with DEI. I think we should radically change it so it serves everyone, so it goes back to its original purpose, rather than serve some radical ideologues. And by the way, when you look at who runs DEIs on campus, what are the credentials that you need for such an important issue, where it requires mathematical skills, you need to know statistics, you need to know what's happening on campus. You need to be an accountant to run DEI. Accountants don't run DEI, ideologues run DEI. There's no reason why ideologues should run DEI. I don't know if merit has been thrown out the window, but I will say this. Look at Columbia University, look at NYU University. Those are not our nation's finest. If that's the best that Columbia can do, or if that's the best that NYU can do, then they should turn off the lights, shut the door, and close out the university. There's no way that these mobs are our nation's finest. And maybe we shouldn't. We should stop selecting just for social activism, right? Because you have to understand how these universities work. If you're in the admission process at Columbia, you get thousands and thousands of applications. Almost all of them perfect SATs. Almost all of them perfect GPAs. Almost all of them advanced placement courses. So what do you turn to? You turn to their extracurriculars, right? So you look at were they socially active? Well, what does socially active mean? Is it volunteering with in hospitals, like I did when I was in high school? No, that's not what it means. Is it tutoring young kids? No, that's not what it means. Is it helping in a nursing home, in an old age home? No, that's not what it means. Were you politically active when you were in high school? So that's what they're selecting on. This is not a bug. This is a feature. What we're seeing now is a feature of the admission process. These are not our nation's finest. We should change that. There are so many fights we need to fight right now. I can't fight that fight, but some people could maybe.
Thank you. So I'm also from Hunter and now at the central office at CUNY. So I have two perspectives. And one of the things during the toughest days after October 7th was this idea that our public safety director shared that, in a school of 30,000 students, 29,500 just want to take classes and go on about their life. And that this is a sort of very large 500-person group. And that may be true, although I defer to you if you think that. I didn't have student interaction. I was on the administration side. But I wonder that when we talk about this sort of, even if it's a minority group on campus, they certainly have a lot of power and they're very, very, very loud. And so one of the things I always think about is that, it's a lot of, and a former comment sort of spoke to this, what we need is Jewish allies on campus, because there's never going to be enough Jews anywhere that's going to make a difference in terms of being powerful in numbers. And so I've thought, and what I've tried to do in large part is to try to create these allies, and they have not always been successful, and not with critical people on senior staff. In my organization have I been successful, much to what you were speaking to earlier. So for Jews on campus right now who are trying to not only support each other, how do we support our students, each other, but also co-opt non-Jewish people to help?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I have always hated the word ally before October 7th, because when I march for women's rights, I march not as an ally, but as someone that concerns me, right? After October 7th, I despise that word, because allyship is a two-way street. And I was there, and I will still be there, by the way, but I was there for Black Lives Matter. I will not march for with the organization, this anti-Semitic organization again, but I will always believe that Black Lives Matter, and I will stand for that. And I've marched for Stop Asian Hate, and I took my kid, and I will keep taking my kid to Gay Pride, right? And we would just dropped cold. So I've stopped using the word allies and started using the word friends. But when you have friends, it's a smaller circle. And you're absolutely right. We cannot do this on our own. We are outnumbered. But what we can do is make the world understand that this is not a Jewish problem. Like you said, 99% of the students want to study. They are being screwed over by a violent, small and growing, but for now, small mob. I don't know how much it costs to go to Hunter. It costs $80,000 to go to Columbia. You can calculate the amount of money that you pay per hour. And when they interrupt your class, they took away hundreds of dollars from, not from you, from your parents. That is not a Jewish problem, but bigger than that. And this is what I'm really concerned about. Earlier today, there was a day of disruption all over the country. A few incredible students from Columbia, brave, courageous Jewish students who I've been talking with and working with and interacting with, are not my students, went to the protest downtown with American flags. Not with Israel flag, with American flag. One of them got his flag burnt. And they told me, look, we're going to send you some videos. You have to watch these videos and make them public. And they sent me the most horrific videos, and I've been doing this for 6 months, the most horrific videos of people chanting death to the USA, of people saying we should burn it all down, that burn all the American flags down. They are not against, they are against Israel and the Jews, but that's a symptom. They're against Western values, right? That's why they share a bed with Hamas, Hezbollah, Houthis, and Iran. It's the axis of resistance. I've been speaking about this for 6 months, and I've told them, and you know, we all say like, oh, I've told you this. I actually have the receipts because I've said this in interviews, that you will see Iran will end up attacking Israel and the students will side with Iran. And that's exactly what happened over the weekend. As I was spending Saturday constantly refreshing the Israeli news to see what's happening and talking with my parents and my brother, and who's on alert because he might go to reserve, and all my friends who are shielding their kids and their kids are sleeping in the bomb shelter. Like, as I'm doing that, I'm seeing on the, what I call Students for Jihad in Palestine, like their social media, them excusing Iran, celebrating Iran. This is not Israel's problem. This is America's problem. And you know, I'm not going to ask how many people here in the room are Jews, but I guess the majority here. The fact that this doesn't trouble every American, not every Jewish American, every American, is a problem. And that's what we should do. That's why, you know, and that's why when I talk about the hostages, right now there are 3 US citizens that are hostages. Forget for a second the extra 130 Israeli citizens, 3 US citizens that are held hostage for more than 6 months. And the organization that that is holding them is being cheered on Columbia's campus. And Hamas is denying those 3 citizens their inalienable right for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This is not a Jewish problem. This is not an Israeli problem. This is an American problem. And that's why we need, and that's why I keep telling everyone, you hear me speak, you agree with something, don't tell your Jewish friend. Your Jewish friend knows. Tell your non-Jewish friends. Text this to your friend who lives in Milwaukee, in Cincinnati, in Austin, Texas, somewhere, in middle America, and let them know what's happening on the coast. Because this will not end with Israel. It's not, already we're seeing, it's not going to end with Israel. I will not be offended if you have to leave. I completely understand.
I like to remind people that what happened in Russia, people in the street, idiots are shouting to globalize the Intifada, and that was 140 people shot to death by ISIS-K in Russia.
That's why I keep telling people, it's a game. You buy on Amazon the cheapest kafia you can find, and you become an activist. For us, it's our lives. This is not a game for us. They do know. They are adults. They do not get to hide behind, oh, I didn't know. They are adults. If I go outside, when someone said all lives matter, if you say it once and someone tells you, hey, well, what people hear is Black Lives Matter, you to say, I'm sorry. You don't get to shout all lives matter twice because that's wrong. And the same thing goes when you scream from the river to the sea, globalize the Intifada, all these chants. You get one pass because you may have not known. 6 months later, you know. And if you don't, that's on you.
Quick question. You said you talked about the power of saying that you're pro-Hamas. So are you right? The CUNY Union, for example, condemned Israel for massacring Palestinians 2.5 years ago. So they're pro-Hamas, but it's something a little bit more than that. They're not only pro-Hamas, but there's only one. So they're pro-terror, but there's only one group against whom they support terror. So it's against the Jews. So it's not just that they're for terror. They're very selective in their, I don't know if there's a way of catching that in a phrase, but I think there's something beyond.
Yeah, that's definitely the case. What they don't realize is, while they are selective, the terrorists that they're cheering on are not selective, right? Like Hamas terrorists, when they marched into Kibbutz Be'eri and indiscriminately shot people, they didn't stop to ask, wait, are you a peace activist? Wait, are you Jewish? Wait, what are your, like they are indiscriminate. That's what they don't understand. Or maybe they do understand, I don't care. Their actions support the terrorists. And that's what we're gonna get to.
Hi, my name is Elise. I want to go back to what you said about needing a definition. And in order to be able to fight something, you have to know what you're fighting. I have an issue with the phrase anti-Semitism because I think it's been co-opted. I think it's very vague. It's very uncertain. Anybody, it's just, in some ways, I feel it's meaningless. So I would say, when I talk about the issue, I call it Jew hatred, and that's clear. So I would wonder whether this whole idea, and I know the IRA definition is really important. However, when we talk about it in our daily lives, the reality is it's Jew hatred. That's what it is, not anti-Semitism, which can be watered down and misconstrued.
Yeah.
That's all.
Right,
Thank you.
you're right. So just, 2-second history of anti-Semitism, it used to be called Jew hatred, right? Then a German journalist who said, one second. Someone really wants to talk with you. Come on, oh, maybe it's an alarm, yeah. Help her with her cane. So the term Jew hatred used to be the term. The term anti-Semitism is a new term from the 19th century by a German journalist who said, oh, We are too educated to hate. You know, this person created the term anti-Semitism to make it seem more clean and empirical. And by the way, at Columbia, some students, professors, and alumni created a group called Documenting Jew Hatred on Campus. You can follow it on social media. They're documenting, it's incredible. 6 months of every incident, and all of this has been sent to Congress, so they know, and to the lawsuits that are happening right now. The reason why using the word Jew hatred is not gonna help us is because they're gonna say, oh, I don't hate Jews, I just hate Zionists. That's what they'll say. And why the definition of IRA is so important is because it's so specific. And it says, you know, here are all the definitions of Jew hatred, right? And also the Jewish homeland. Now you can criticize Israel's government. You can criticize its policies. God knows I did. I do. You know, and we can get into this. I took a punch to the face from a cop in Israel for protesting the government. You can criticize the government, but still love the country, or at least not criticize its existence. The moment you pass towards Israel is bad to Israel shouldn't exist, that's when you're anti-Semitic. Call it Jew hatred, call it bigotry, whatever it is. I don't care what the name is. That should be, you know, the line that will not be crossed, right? Because how many of you are critical, you know, with a show of hands of the US government, of something it's done? How many of you think the US should not exist? Exactly. You can criticize a government. You can criticize, well, if you're in a democracy, not if you're in Qatar or in Gaza. You can criticize a government, you can criticize its policies, you can criticize its army, its military. You do not say that it doesn't have a right to exist, because now you're denying Jewish safety.
I just want to add one thing about the anti-Semitism, the history of anti-Semitism, just because I love this stuff. So it was unfashionable to hate Jews because of their religion all of a sudden. And that is when anti-Semitism came about in 1879, and there was a group, the League of Anti-Semites. It wasn't hidden, people were joining it, and very proud anti-Semites. And it reminds me very much today, people proud anti-Zionists. So it's just another iteration.
Right, and the interesting thing about anti-Zionists, you know, they use Zionist as a derogatory term. It's the only derogatory term that I know of that the group that it's being thrown at is like, yeah, I'm a Zionist. Like and I won't let you take the word from me. I'm a Zionist. I'm a proud Zionist. You know, like maybe you don't understand what Zionism is, and I can help you understand it, but you don't get to use that as a derogatory term. You know, the Z word.
I found that more non-Jews understand better than the Jews. And a lot of the non-Jews tell me they can't believe that so many of the Jews don't get it. There's an interesting man who was a professor in Italy, this Francisco Gil White. He became obsessed with anti-Semitism because he said it's such a unique hatred that expands beyond Jews and engulfs basically all of humanity. And when people ask him, why are you so obsessed, Jews? He says, because it's selfish on my part. I become involved in it, even though I don't want to, because it takes us all in. It's such a unique type of hatred. And people like him, I found that so many people who are not Jewish actually recognize the dangers more than the Jew. They are constantly making excuses, justifications, all kinds of excuses.
Look.
But I also found too, if you don't mind me just saying that, I found that that side, the pro-Palestine, have just
Pro-Hamas.
changed.
I am pro-Palestine, so it's very pro-Hamas.
Okay, but in the way that they have changed the entire history of Israel. That's why they say it's not anti-Semitic to say that they can't have this country because you stole it from these other people. You took their land. You created it's a whole thing. So when you get to the root of it and you see where they're coming from. The whole history and facts have been changed to suit something else. And it's impossible when you try to present everything differently. They can't get it.
Yeah, I do want to say something about first point you made about Jews not getting it. I don't blame any Jew for not getting it. Because you could speak more to this. We have defense mechanisms. If you wake up in the morning like I do, thinking, oh my God, this will never end. How are you supposed to keep going? Some mornings, and people ask me like, how do you keep going? I was like, well, I have kids. That's the only reason I keep going. If I didn't have kids, I'd just curl up in a ball for 6 months. It's so hard being a Jew. So while I talk with people and I try to get them to understand, and for years, and this is something that's especially unique for American Jewry, for years, American Jews have been told it's going to be okay, just keep your head down. You can't blame someone who for years has been told, for generations have been told it's going to be okay, keep your head down, all of a sudden to say, now is the time. So part of my job is to go and tell people, it's not going to be okay unless we make it okay. This time it's different, right? And part of the reason I think that I've been so vocal is because I did not grow up with anti-Semitism. If I had grown up with anti-Semitism, like many American Jews that I'm meeting now, but it's small, it's gradual. You're fourth grader and someone says something about you and you go to your mom and dad and they tell you, oh, they're stupid. And then in high school and it's slow. So you grow a shield, you grow the defense mechanism. I feel like I've been thrown into this with no defense mechanism, and that's why I'm reacting the way I do. Now, and I've said this before, and I'll go on the record again. I hope I'm wrong. I hope that history, tells my story, Shai Davidai, as the fool on the hill, the boy that cried wolf. I hope I'm wrong, but there's a small chance that I'm absolutely right. And if I'm right, we know exactly where that train is going. So that's why I'm talking. Now, we can talk about the anti-Zionist Jews, the Jonathan navel glazing, Jews, but that's a different story. Most Jews that are right now in denial, well, we're in denial when there's a risk, right? That's when you deny things. We promised her, yes, Jessica, yeah.
Hi, I'm also a CUNY alum. Thanks to Michael. I did file a Title VI lawsuit against Hunter. What was it? Yeah, 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago.
Just
what-
hold it closer.
Yeah. Oh, what do you think the opportunity is for some on-campus, actually intellectually honest debates or dishonest? Is there an opportunity?
Well, if you ask me, there's a lot of opportunity. The problem is that the other side is not willing, right? So Columbia had several. There was the dean of the School of International and Public Affairs is an Israeli woman. She brought the dean of the public school, Princeton, who's a Palestinian woman, for a conversation. One group, boycotted it. Students for Jihad in Palestine. But not enough that they boycotted it, they were actually demonstrating and protesting it. We had another event. I didn't organize it, but with former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, an event called The Use of Sexual Violence in Intractable Conflict. Ukraine, Sudan, Rwanda, Israel. They picketed it, they protested it, they shouted Hillary Clinton down. They are not interested in conversation. I'll tell you more. If you look at the handbook of Students for Jihad in Palestine, Students for Justice in Palestine, you'll see the term anti-normalization. The term anti-normalization means that you cannot speak with a Zionist. Because if you do, you normalize their existence. You do not interview with Israeli newspapers. Because if you do, you normalize Israel's existence. So they've created an intellectual, it's not intellectual, but they've created a framework for hate that is siloed from the world because they refuse to converse. They see conversation and discussion as a negative thing. That is the opposite of academia.
I just want to share this. So there were a couple recently anti-Israel, anti-Semitic programs at CUNY Hunter College. I tried to attend one of them, wasn't able to, but it was that documentary, this new documentary film, which was just not good. The quality, Israelism.
Oh,
I actually ended up seeing it, very benign. And then there was just something recently with CUNY Hunter College, Women's and Gender Studies Department, and they invited this woman who they even said was the brains behind the BDS movement, Omar Barghouti's.
You don't need a lot of brain, but yeah.
Omar Barghouti's, Omar Barghouti's cousin. So, and I'm in the room. And so two things. Number one, I asked if anyone else wanted to come with me. No one wanted to come. I understand why. But for me, it's so important to be there to hear what's going on. But also, I want to engage. And most people don't. And there was this young man. I say young because I'm not as young anymore. and he just said a few comments that it feels like there's a lot of hatred here. There's an us versus them. Pretty benign statements. And so they asked, where are you from? What's your background? Tell us a little bit about yourself. And then they got to the crux of it. And he said, I just don't think that Jews are going anywhere, Palestinians are going anywhere, Israel's going anywhere, Palestine's going anywhere, he says. And he proceeded and they said, okay, let's move to the next person. And then he says, do you believe that rape is resistance? And all of a sudden, people just started shutting him down by calling misogynist and all these other words, and he couldn't have a conversation. So I know sometimes there's a time and place for these conversations, but it seems like there was not a time or place for his question even. So I'm just noticing that it's so hard. But the thing that I wanted to ask you is this idea of freedom of speech, free speech on college campuses in general. And I think if I been following you a little while now. You weren't an expert before, but you had to learn a little bit more about this. Any information you can share with us about these programs? Yeah. Because personally, I also don't like to silence them, but I try to find a healthy balance of how do we combat the lies, but just out of curiosity, your understanding of.
Yeah, so first of all, and I have to say this, I am not the expert of free speech. I am not the person you should listen to. I'm a person you should listen to, but not. There's many, many different angles to what we're talking about right now. But the important thing, and I can go into details, but the important thing is freedom of speech is one of the pillars of American society. But so is freedom of religion. And so is civil rights and equality. Right now, one group is getting freedom of speech at the expense of other groups' speech, because we see who's getting shouted down on campuses, and it's only Jews and their supporters. B, freedom of religion, because I just came back from Cornell, where students told me that they had to cancel a few prayers in their Jewish Center for Jewish Living because out of fear. Now, I'm not a religious person, but if someone wants to be religious, and I don't care what kind of religion, you need to have that freedom. But the most important thing for me personally is civil rights. Because right now, every group has freedom of speech. on campuses except one. Because we know exactly what would have happened if these kind of protests and chants were targeted at any other ethnic group or any other religious group. So that is why the lawsuit that Columbia is facing and the lawsuit that Harvard is facing and many other schools are going to face are lawsuits that are grounded in the civil rights rulings of 1964. This is a civil rights issue. This is our civil rights moment. And that's the important thing. Now, maybe again, this is because I didn't grow up in the US. So I truly believe as someone who's learning the US culture, I've been here for 14 years, but I'm learning it. And I hope to keep learning as I grow. The US has a problem, a real problem, that there's not a belief in freedom of speech, there's a fetish of freedom of speech. There's a fetish. Every American I've spoken with, from the left or from the right, they say, oh, if we don't have freedom of speech, we won't have democracy. And I was like, have you ever been to any other democracy in the world? Go anywhere in Western Europe. Go to Latin America. Go to Scandinavia. Go to Israel. Those are strong democracies, maybe not as strong as the US, but strong democracies. And they have free speech. But there are a few things that you can't say, or a few boundaries, that's it. Now, I don't know where the boundaries should be. I don't know if they should be very narrow or very broad. I think broad, but we should have a boundary. Because when you don't set boundaries, what you get is free shouting, not free speech. You get free violence. And I'm sorry, and I won't apologize for this. I don't think Hitler should have had free speech. Prove me wrong. And I don't think, of what we know now, at some point, the Nazi party should have been stopped and say, this is too far. And I think what we're seeing now is the modern version of the Hitler Youth. I've gotten, a lot of flack for saying this, but I'm not saying they are like the Hitler Youth. I'm saying they are the Hitler Youth. This is the modern version. Look at how they engage. Look at their structure. Look at the fact that when you go to protest, they have security marshals that are marked with armbands. You know who else had security marshals? The Nazis. They were called the brown shirts. The brown shirts started as a security force for the protests. Now, I'm not saying that these security marshals will end up doing that, but I'm not taking the risk. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you
I
so
truly
much.
believe that days like these, evenings like these, when we meet together and we disagree on some stuff, that's important. That's exactly what we should be doing. And I want you to end this. I've been looking.
So it's not a question. I just wanted to say thank you very much for what you're doing. I've been following you since the night you posted the video. And it's thanks to you that I decided to file a lawsuit against the state of New York and against the Department of Education. And I'm in the process, and it's really, really thanks to you, because and now being on the other side, I know how difficult it is and how much you're probably exposed to all the hatred, and it's really not an easy role to take on yourself. But thank you for encouraging everyone to do so, and you are making a huge difference. Yes.
I do also want to just say thank you to Shai for being here. Amazing. From the very moment that we connected, you were so generous and thoughtful in everything. So I really, just for the sake of that, just being a human, was beautiful. So thank you. Thank you for everyone for being here, taking the time to be here.